Thank you very much, dear President of the Human Rights Council. Thank you for inviting us. Dear High Commissioner for Human Rights, colleagues of the panel, distinguished delegates, excellencies, friends. Well, to be human is to be capable of reason, of compassion, of creativity, of love. It is to have the potential to flourish, to live a life of meaning and purpose. But this potential can only be realized in a world that supports and sustains us, a world where we have access to clean air, clean water, and nutritious food, a world where we can live in harmony with nature rather than in conflict with it. This is why the triple environmental crisis of climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss is a human rights crisis, like we have heard from the High Commissioner. It is a crisis that threatens our very existence, our ability to live fulfilling lives, and our fundamental rights as human beings. Climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss are not just abstract concepts. They are real and present dangers that are already impacting the lives of millions of people around the world, explaining more and more also conflict and migration. Pollution claims 9 million lives annually. You said 7, dear High Commissioner. We will have to check on it. Extreme weather events exacerbated by climate change is now one of the greatest risks we face, on par with armed conflict. As deserts expand and our oceans become more acidic, our arable land and our fishable seas shrink in size. This loss of agricultural land and marine resources is particularly devastating for communities in developing countries who rely on these resources for their livelihoods and well-being. For them, it is not just a matter of economics, it's a matter of survival. But climate change is not only impacting our food and health systems at the source, in the seas, forests, and jungles that produce our food and medicine, but also in the way these products move around the world. Remember, 80% of trade happens through maritime transport. This year, we have witnessed a terrible drought in the Panama Canal, bringing down cargo traffic by almost a half, according to UNCTAD's own research. These disruptions not only meant that ships spend more days at sea, emitting 70% more greenhouse gases and exacerbating the vicious cycle of the triple planetary crisis. They also meant disruptions in food and medicine affecting factories, supermarkets, and pharmacies. And they meant added price pressures to the ongoing cost of living crisis, which has served as a reminder that if human rights are about access to food and medicine, then this access is determined not just by availability, but mainly by the affordability of these products too. These last 2 years, we have seen far too many families skip meals, self-ration pills, and make impossible choices between putting food on the table and paying for essential medicines. But it is not only families being forced to make impossible choices. Several governments around the world face a very similar situation. Extreme weather events cause around $140 billion in economic damages every year. These climate-related costs pile up on already strained public budgets, burdened by high interest rates, COVID-era debts, and the massive investment imperative of climate mitigation and adaptation. As a result, already today, 3.3 billion people live in countries that spend more on debt servicing than on either health or education. Making matters worse, according to our World Investment Report that we launched today, released precisely this very morning, global investment into SDGs was down by more than 10% last year, with two sectors, listen, agri-food systems and water and sanitation registering fewer internationally financed projects in 2023 than in 2015, when the SDGs were adopted. A climate-related disaster worsened, and as climate investment gaps for adaptation and mitigation continue to widen, these impossible choices that are at the heart of the nexus between climate change, human rights, and development will become ever more common and ever more impossible if we don't take bold and swift decisions. And here, dear President, is where the call of the Secretary General comes for the Summit of the Future that really looks at this interdependence and many of these issues. And this is a heartbreaking reality that is incompatible with the fundamental principles of human rights. So, Your Excellencies, it is time for a shift in our approach to the triple environmental crisis. We must move beyond a narrow focus and embrace a human rights-based approach that puts people at the center, and a sustainable development approach that is human rights-based at the same time. This means empowering those most affected by the triple crisis to participate in decision-making processes and have their voices heard. It means ensuring access to justice and remedy for environmental harm, particularly for marginalized and vulnerable communities. A human rights-based approach also means recognizing the interconnectedness of all human rights. The right to a healthy environment is not just as an environmental right. It is an economic, social, and cultural right. It is also a health right, a food right, a water right, a right to development, and a right to life itself. We cannot address one without addressing the others. This requires a holistic and integrated approach that addresses the root causes of the environmental crisis, including unsustainable consumption and production patterns, inequality, and lack of sufficient international finance in the developing world to meet the SDGs. Your Excellencies, in closing, let us not forget that the triple environmental crisis is not just an environmental issue, it is a human rights issue too. It is a matter of justice, of equity, and of our shared humanity. We must act now with urgency and determination to protect our planet and the rights of all. I thank you.